Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be a list of all of my most anticipated July releases. July looks like it's going to be one of those months that's just absolutely jam-packed with new book releases. In particular, the middle of the month, I feel like I have a lot of book releases for those 2 Tuesdays in the middle of the month. So without further ado, let's just get started. I will have information on every single book that I talk about up on the screen with me, as well as in the description bar below if you'd like to check any of these books out. But let's just go ahead and start talking about some of my most anticipated releases for the month of July. So starting off on July 5th, we have a release from one of pretty much my auto-buy or auto-read authors, and that would be the Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. And this is a psychological thriller about an unforgettable and unsettling friendship with blood-chilling twists, crackling wit, and a thrumming pulse. Art Barbara is 17 years old. He's a high school loner in the 1980s who had no idea his extracurricular club for volunteer pallbearers at poorly attended funerals would make the coolest girl in school his friend. He finds it cool, but also a little weird, that she brought along her Polaroid camera to take pictures of the corpses. Weirder still, her obsession with New England folklore that involves her digging up the dead and the strange and terrifying things that just seemed to happen when she was around. But beggars can't be choosers when it comes to friends. Decades later, Art tries to make sense of it all by writing The Pallbearers Club, a memoir, but somehow this friend got her hands on the manuscript and, well, she has some issues with it, and now she's making cuts. The Pallbearers Club is an immersive, suspenseful portrait of an unusual and disconcerting friendship. That sounds very interesting, like a story within a story. I really have pretty much loved everything that I have read by Paul Tremblay. I feel like this is going to be no different. Very excited for a lot of, I feel like on this list, kind of horror or thriller books. I feel like July is going to be a very good month for horror and like gothic and like speculative fiction, so very excited to check that out. Next up on July 12th, we have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, and this is a gripping and atmospheric retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. This is an author where I have read a number of things by her before, and I have really enjoyed pretty much everything that I've read by her. I know she does like a lot of romance and fantasy kind of retellings, and then she also does like horror, so I've enjoyed the horror more, although I have read some retellings from her and I thought those were really good as well. So I have a feeling this is just going to be T. Kingfisher at her absolute best, like by combining the horror elements that I think she's really good at writing with the retelling elements that she likes to do as well. So very intrigued. I don't know a lot about this Edgar Allan Poe story, but I'm very intrigued. Next up, also coming out on the 12th, we have The It Girl by Ruth Ware. This is a mystery following a woman on the search for answers a decade after her friend's murder. April Coutts-Cliveden was the first person that Hannah Jones met at Oxford. She was the ultimate it girl, and she quickly pulled Hannah into her orbit. Together, they developed a group of devoted and inseparable friends during their first term. By the end of the second, April was dead. Now, a decade later, Hannah is expecting her first child, and the man convicted of killing April has died in prison. Relieved to have finally put the past behind her, Hannah's world is rocked when a young journalist comes knocking and presents new evidence that the man might have been innocent. As Hannah reconnects with old friends and delves deeper into the mystery of April's death, she realizes that the friends she thought she knew all have something to hide, including a murder. I'm very like hit or miss on Ruth Ware. I've noticed if I don't like the premise when I read the premise, then I can't really get into the book, but the premises that I've enjoyed of hers and I've picked up the books and read them, I've really enjoyed. So Death of Mrs. Westaway, The Turn of the Key. I read one that was on a cruise ship as well, even though I forget the name of that one. But again, this is an author where I have enjoyed a lot of the things that she has come out with before, so this sounds very interesting. I also enjoyed In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, which I feel like kind of has like a similar sort of feel to it, so I'm very interested in reading this latest from Ruth Ware. Next up, also coming out the 12th, we have Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This is a gothic horror about falling in love, loss, grief, and what life there is in the deep sea. Mary thinks she's got her wife back when Leah finally returns after a deep sea mission that ended in catastrophe. It soon becomes clear though that Leah is not the same. Whatever happened in that vessel, whatever it was they were supposed to be studying before they were stranded on the ocean floor, Leah has brought part of it back with her onto dry land and into their home. Moving through something that only resembles normal life, Mary comes to realize that the life they thought they had before might be gone. And although Leah is still there, Mary can feel the woman she loves slipping from her grip. So this one kind of reminds me almost of Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant, almost a little bit of Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. So yeah, I think it's a very intriguing premise. Gothic horror, I do really love a good gothic horror story, as well as I feel like one of the only things, I do read a lot of horror, one of the only things that consistently kind of scares me is the ocean and like deep sea, and like kind of what lies underneath the ocean. So yeah, I'm very interested in seeing this one, kind of figuring out more about the gothic horror elements of this one. And this is actually an author I have not read before. The other authors on this list I've all read before, but this one I haven't. So I'm really looking forward to checking that one out. We also have on July 12th another kind of watery horror, and that would be They Drown Our Daughters by Katrina Monroe. They say that Cape Disappointment is haunted. That's why tourists used to flock there in droves. Now the tourists are long gone, and when Meredith Strand and her young daughter return to Meredith's childhood home after a split from her wife, the Cape seems more haunted by regret than any malevolent force. But her mother, who is suffering from early stages of Alzheimer's, is convinced the ghost stories are real. Not only is there something in the water, but it's watching them, waiting for them, reaching out to Meredith's daughter the way it has to every woman in their line for generations. And if Meredith isn't careful, all three women, bound by blood and heartbreak, will be lost one by one to the ocean's mournful call. Part modern gothic, part ghost story, They Drown Our Daughters explores the depths of motherhood, identity, and the lengths a woman will go to hold on to both. So July seems to be the month for sapphic gothic horror. I'm very intrigued by this one. Obviously, I know I keep saying that because they are all on my anticipated releases list, but I do enjoy like an intergenerational story, especially told through a horror lens. I really enjoy complex relationships, complex family relationships, particularly in regards to just close family or mothers and children and that sort of horror. Very fascinating to me. Very intrigued by the ghost story elements and the gothic elements of this one. Next up, coming out the 19th, this is another horror, very horror heavy month for me in terms of releases, but that would be Mary, An Awakening of Terror by Nat Cassidy. So this horror debut novel is a blend of Midsummer and American Psycho. Mary is a quiet, middle-aged woman doing her best to blend into the background. Unremarkable, invisible, and unknown even to herself. But lately, things have been changing inside of Mary. Along with the hot flashes and body aches, she can't look in a mirror without passing out, and the voices in her head have been urging her to do unspeakable things. Fired from her job in New York, she moves back to her hometown, hoping to reconnect with her past and inner self. Instead, visions of terrifying, mutilated specters overwhelm her with increasing regularity, and she begins auto-writing strange thoughts and phrases. Mary discovers that these experiences are echoes of an infamous serial killer. Then the killings begin again. Mary's definitely going to find herself. So this is a Tor Nightfire release. I've had a lot of luck with their releases. From the synopsis, I do get a lot of American Psycho vibes, not so much Midsummer, so I'm kind of interested to see where those aspects might come into play, but nevertheless, I do like both of those comp titles. So I am looking forward to checking this out, kind of seeing if this new release is a good blend of those two or not, so definitely we'll be checking that out on the 19th. Also on the 19th, we have The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I feel like this author is a writing machine. I feel like she always has multiple projects coming out a year, and I never know about them until like right before they come out. I didn't realize before I sat down to film this how many repeat authors that I really enjoy that I have on this list. But this is also a reimagining. It's a reimagining of The Island of Dr. Moreau, set against the backdrop of 19th century Mexico. This is a retelling to a story that I am kind of familiar with. I think I've definitely read also like adaptations or reimaginings of the story before too, so I don't want to know too much going into it, but I do think this author is really good with retellings, is really good. I think I saw this has like sci-fi and then like magical realism sort of elements to it. Not too sure, but I know that when I go into a Silvia Moreno-Garcia book, I know it's going to be completely unlike the book that I've read by her before. I think she's really good at just writing very specific stories that all have very different tones, but are like perfect for the individual incredible stories that she's writing. So I'm really looking forward to checking this out. It says it's a dreamy reimagining and just the different backdrop, the different setting of 19th century Mexico. Very intrigued to check it out. Next up, also coming out the 19th, we have The Force of Such Beauty by Barbara Bourland. This one is a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I'm just very intrigued and interested by it. It really caught my eye. I don't know why. It's not what I normally read, but I'm here for it. So after a failed escape attempt, the princess of a tiny kingdom begins to reevaluate her life. Caroline, a former marathon runner who dropped out of school at 14 to pursue an Olympic medal, was the perfect candidate for a tiara. Shapely, disciplined, accustomed to public attention, and utterly uneducated. When she meets the handsome prince of a small European kingdom, her fate is sealed. With a collar of pearls locked around her throat and a rope of diamonds leashing her to a balcony, Caroline uses her once powerful body to smile, wave, and produce children with perfect grace. But as she begins to open her eyes to the world around her and examine her own reflection, Caroline discovers that she may have entered a bargain that cannot be undone. Set in a grotesque and gaudy pre-recession 2000s Europe, The Force of Such Beauty is a heart-wrenching and compulsively readable testament to the way in which real-life power structures around the world ultimately rest on the subjugation of women's bodies. So I don't know if we can call the early 2000s historical fiction yet. I feel like we can because that was like 20 years ago. But contemporary historical, like especially like near historical fiction, not something I pick up a lot, but I think this is going to have some really like interesting things to say. So definitely looking forward to checking out this one. I think it's going to be a very interesting read. Next up, also coming out the 19th, this is the only YA on this list. That is going to be Youngblood by Sasha. This is sapphic vampires at a boarding school, so I really wanted to pick it up. But this is two queer teen bloodsuckers at an elite vampire-only boarding school must go up against all of vamperdom when they uncover a frightening conspiracy on campus. I have kind of been aging out of YA, I've noticed a little bit, but this book I really want to check out because it just has everything that I kind of look for, especially in vampire fiction. So we have sapphic vampires, we have a academia boarding school sort of setting, so it sounds like urban fantasy since vampires are fantastical creatures, a little bit of horror involving deep secrets about like this whole vampire organization and the school itself, and one of the main characters is named Taylor, so I feel like I have to check this up. It's got my name literally written all over it, so yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I really love the cover and I really cannot wait to check this book out. Last but not least, we have Nightmare Fuel, The Science of Horror Films by Nina Nesseth. This comes out July 26th, and this is a pop science look at fear, how and why horror films get under our skin, and why we keep coming back for more. So this is a nonfiction. As both a horror fan and like a fan of like pop science kind of deep dives into different cultural things, I'm very excited for this one. So with the affection of a true horror fan and the critical analysis of a scientist, Nesseth explains how audiences engage horror with both their brains and their bodies and teases apart the elements that make horror films tick. Nightmare Fuel covers everything from jump scares to creature features, serial killers to the undead, and the fears that stick around to those that fade with time. With in-depth discussions and spotlight features on some of horror's most popular films, from The Exorcist to Hereditary, and interviews with directors, film editors, composers, and horror academics, Nightmare Fuel is a deep dive into the science of fear, a celebration of the genre, and a survival guide for going to bed after the credits roll. This just sounds like a really fun nonfiction because I do love horror, and I was like a kid where I feel like my parents were very surprised when I got into horror because I was like a very anxious child. I'm an anxious adult now, but just yeah, a lot of times I do kind of wonder sometimes like why I love horror as much as I love horror, and like why it's like such not just like a fun genre and an exciting genre, but like one of my favorite genres and sometimes very comforting genre as well. So very intrigued to pick this up and kind of maybe explore more about why I love horror the way that I do. But there you have it. That is the last book on my July anticipated releases and the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, let me know your most anticipated release for the month of July. Stay safe, stay spooky, subscribe to my channel for more content, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!